Good evening and welcome to today's Tropics for July 1st, 2021. Please note, I'm not a meteorologist and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storm I'm talking about, and for any decision making, please consult National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm looking at Tropical Storm Elsa. So this was MS 97L has now been upgraded and is now a tropical cyclone. It's currently at 40 knots and it's trying to strengthen, but the conditions aren't too favorable for it. One thing is it's sped up a lot, and it's a little earlier than previously thought because it's already moving at 29 miles an hour. So it's about as fast as we've really ever gotten, exception of Tropical Storm Chantal in 2013. So this is about as fast as a tropical cyclone generally gets in this far south. So that has been kind of keeping it from getting really organized. And at the same time, while the low-level flow is at like 25 knots, you have the mid-level flow, which is still easterly, but it's only at like 5 knots. So you end up getting like 15 to 20 knots of it's kind of like northwesterly sort of mid-level shear, and that has been interrupting Elsa's organization along with the movement it's had for quite a while. So it's been trying to wrap some convection up shear, kind of it forms here, then it thrives around here, and then it starts dying when it gets out into the up shear part, and that's been continuing and hasn't been able to wrap much convection up shear, and so it's been kind of steady state. It doesn't seem to have strengthened too much at this point. But if it can start wrapping convection up shear, then it'll start strengthening, and that's or whether or not it does that tonight seems to be the big divergence between some of the bullish and more bearish guidance. So let's take a look at the infrared imagery here, and we can see this pretty nice looking burst here. Deep convection. It's mostly around 70 or negative 70 degrees Celsius, and this is just to the southwest or to the northeast of the level center, which seems to be around here towards the southern or southwestern side here. And uh, if you've been watching the storm today, you can kind of notice that the main kind of convection area has been slowly rotating around. If you remember this morning, a lot of the convection was actually south of the little center, but now it's kind of rotated more to the east and the north. So we'll see if it can actually rotate up shear, because that is what the GFS does, and that is some of the more bullish model guidance out of what we've seen. Now let's take a look at the water vapor imagery, and you can see there is a bit of dry air, in fact, ahead of Elsa, and that may have also not really helped with keeping the northwestern side that's been sheared uh, convection free. We've got the upper level convergence probably also enhancing this dry air signal, but it doesn't seem that dry air is a major factor so far, because if you'll notice, the storm is actually quite large, so that is a sign that there's a lot of moisture to work with. And through today, we haven't really seen a whole lot of outflow boundary activity with the convection. If there's a lot of dry air, you'd be seeing a lot of thunderstorms collapsing and then having these big low-level outflow boundaries. But we're not really seeing that, so it doesn't seem that there is a whole lot of dry air that's currently affecting the system. Uh, Looking at the steering, so far it's again under very strong trade wind flow. That's because of a strong ridge just to the north. It's getting to kind of the peak of that ridge, and this is about as fast as it'll get. It might speed up a little bit, possibly 25 to 30 knots as it gets to this part of the ridge, and it seems this will be the most unfavorable part of the trek for Elsa, kind of discounting land for a second, because they'll be moving quite fast, and that'll mean it won't be able to uh, organize too well. It might be dealing with some westerly shear because of how fast the low level flow is, and also if it is on the weaker side, then it won't be able to stay open or stay closed low, and it'll degenerate into a wave and maybe redevelop later, but that would kind of put it kind of further behind. Now, as it starts to round the ridge, though, as start getting past like 70 degrees west, then it's going to start rounding the ridge, and it'll start moving a bit more north of west. There's a bit of uncertainty there, but in general, we're expecting the system to start slowing down there, and that's when the conditions might start improving, and then eventually it'll probably turn a bit north as you have this trough here start to erode the ridge, and eventually it'll turn north somewhere around here, or at least more north. This run kind of takes it west of Florida, but again, it's still not quite certain where it will be because we don't have uh, a very good idea of where Lowell Center is. It's become a lot more defined, but it's still a very large center. So, if you have some short-term kind of trends that might move it around, and we have had a decent amount of movement here, but in general, start turning more to the north, and as it starts slowing down, you'll have a trade wind convergence and some more favorable conditions. But we'll have to see what happens as it starts getting to northwestern Caribbean, because that's where these islands are here. You've got Hispaniola, you've got Jamaica and Cuba, and they all have a decent amount of mountains. And so if Elsa starts to get too close to these or runs into one of the islands, that might cause it to become a lot more disrupted by those mountainous or that mountainous terrain. So the intensity is pretty low confidence because we don't know how to interact with the islands because they're quite close together, and we just don't know quite yet where it will be because there's a degree of error in the track. Now let's look at kind of the two warring model camps. The GFS, which has generally been quite bullish on Elsa for quite a while now, and the Euro model, which has been pretty bearish on it, but since has kind of corrected stronger, but is still a lot more bearish than much of the other guidance. So what the GFS does is it wraps that convection up shear, and so that means it can start strengthening again, even though it is a little sheared. And so while the conditions are still not the greatest, the actual structure of the storm is enough to kind of get it to intensify a little more, and so it makes it into a likely upper end tropical storm while it's in the eastern Caribbean. And since the flow further up is actually a bit more easterly rather than southeasterly, that might be one reason it keeps it a bit more south relative to the Euro model, which doesn't do that. It kind of keeps it weak, maybe even opens it into a wave where it seems to be here. And so that means it doesn't do as much. It seems to be steered by a weaker ridge and eventually just takes it into Hispaniola. And so it doesn't do a whole lot with it. And so there's still a lot of model divergence, even not only, or even a couple days out, we're seeing stuff like between like a hurricane or a just tropical wave. And here's kind of one kind of point of evidence of why, even though the entire column of atmosphere here kind of has easterly winds, it's not the most favorable because again you can see the very strong trade wind flow, and even though the wind is easterly in the upper levels, which is unusual for early July in the Caribbean because of a lack of the usual seasonal tut cell for this point, it's still enough to cause some westerly shear. So that's one of the things that Elsa will be dealing with as it right before it starts slowing down a little bit more. Uh, now, as it gets into the northwestern Caribbean, this is really where we'll have to watch it more closely because it seems that the upper level conditions are still favorable for it, but it won't be traveling as fast as it starts rounding the ridge, and it'll have access to some pretty warm waters. So if it doesn't interact with the land too much, it might be able to start strengthening in this part of the basin. Again, there's been a lot of trends, and it could easily, say, hit the southern part of Haiti or hit Jamaica or Cuba. So it is hard to say right now what it'll do. This is probably something that we won't really get nailed down until the final a little bit of it, uh, because of the track errors inherent with forecasting a tropical cyclone. But definitely, we should watch it here if it doesn't look like it will be heading into the land. But the forecast starts getting a little less confident outside, say, 3 days, just because of the close quarters to the land. Now, taking a look at the official National Hurricane Center cone for Elsa, they keep Elsa at 50 knots pretty much the entire forecast period, which seems to be kind of taking the middle between two scenarios. One, which is supported heavily by climatology, which is it kind of opens up possibly into a wave or something like that, and can't really get going, and probably weakens more so below 50 knots. And then one that's supported by a lot of the guidance, but not so much climatology, where it strengthens a bit more than that, and probably gets stronger as it gets into the Western Caribbean and slows down. We don't quite know where we are or what's going to happen at this point, but we'll probably know a lot more on Friday once we've kind of seen the trends with, say, convection rotating up shear, and it starts getting into the Eastern Caribbean. We can see if it's opening up or it's kind of sticking together and holding its own. But in the even nearer term, it is headed into the Lesser Antilles, mostly the Windward Islands, but also possibly parts of the Leeward Islands will be impacted by those strong winds. And those short-term trends, whether it goes more north or more south, it's very important because if it moves to your north, it's less likely to give you really gusty winds because they'll be traveling so fast the westerlies won't be too strong. But if it goes a bit more south and you end up on the north side of it, that means you'll be in that much more vigorous north part, where you'll have stronger wind, possibly damaging wind, especially towards higher elevations, and squally conditions. So you should be prepared for that because it is coming quite fast. It'll probably pass by the area Friday morning to the afternoon. Eventually, then it'll travel into the Caribbean, start slowing down, and as it passes by Hispaniola, there's a possibility the flow causes some upslope convection, and that would cause probably a lot of rain and possibility for flooding and mudslides as it comes by. And then there's also a tropical storm watch up for southern coast of Haiti because at this point it is forecast to kind of make a close approach at Haiti, and that would probably cause tropical storm force winds as it passes by to the south. Of course, there is Cuba, Jamaica, and Hispaniola, especially Haiti, in the cone, so it could really reasonably hit any of these islands, and that will kind of have a big effect if it goes right over one of them on the intensity. And also, eventually, as it starts turning north, it seems that at this point, Florida is, especially southern Florida, is in the crosshairs of Elsa. Now, it's again, the intensity forecast is quite uncertain right now, so we don't quite know how strong it'll be. But you should be prepared for a possibility of something coming along early next week. But just generally keep an eye on it as it heads closer and we start to nail down that uncertainty. Luckily, the next 24 hours, we'll know a lot more about Elsa because then we'll have recon, we'll have a better idea of the upper air conditions, we'll have a better idea of the storm structure. We'll see if it has been able to improve its structure like the GFS says, or if it hasn't. So the next 24 hours from now, we'll likely know a whole lot more about Elsa and what it will do, and hopefully we'll be able to make a better forecast at that point. But at this point, there isn't a whole lot more to talk about. So that's about it for tonight. And if you have any questions or comments about my video, please let me know. Thanks for watching.